Hello, everybody. If you would get a little closer just so you can hear us okay. I'm so glad to see everyone here. I'm John Morris. I'm one of the coordinators of the exhibit committee. I'm also reference and information literacy librarian here. We are very excited to have Nick Reynolds here again this year with his externalities exhibit. And Nick Reynolds, if you don't already know, he is one of the professors in the art department. And with no further ado, I will turn it over to Nick. Thank you so much, Nick, for coming and for showing with us again.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming. I guess initial thanks to Blowers Gallery and the Ramsey Library and John and Jerry, who is not on camera, I guess, at this moment. But thank you very much. They were absolutely instrumental to making this happen. So I appreciate the follow-up. It's kind of a follow-up exhibit, I guess, to last year's around the same time. Yeah, where to start? I guess as a general overview, this might be hard to shoot, but the entire show going around to the other side of the wall, the majority of the pictures are from my grad exhibition, my thesis exhibition from 2020. There is like a little statement about that there. So I graduated in the spring of 2020. My show was up for about 2 weeks, and then it shut down due to the lockdown. So that show was called The Emotional Plague, so the timing was appropriate. We can go into details about that if you want, what that means. But the bulk of the show is from that exhibit, from the Emotional Plague exhibit, most of the big pieces. And then there's the triptych over here and the 6 smaller pieces. Those are current pieces that would have been done, I guess, like wrapped up earlier this year. And that's externalities. So that triptych is externalities. That's what that's referring to. So my thinking is, it feels like I kind of want to jump around a bit, but I don't know how this is going to work. Camera person, so. And to tell you the truth, I'm totally open to this being a conversation. If you guys have immediate questions about anything, please like jump in, speak up. There's a microphone over there. And then otherwise, I'll just kind of probably just start rambling and see what I come up with. So the Emotional Plague show is, I guess, kind of represents a culmination of the pieces that I was trying to figure out that started probably like 3-4 years before I went to grad school. Things were starting to shift in the way that I was working. And I was largely working in a classical realist kind of way, strictly observational, very representational, and somehow I kind of came to I don't know what, a conclusion. I don't know, something wasn't working, I wasn't really feeling that anymore, and I needed to change something, and that was very unsettling. It was very difficult. And so I was like, okay, what exactly are you trying to do? And so I started to assess what my classical realist training was. And I thought to myself, well, you got to get rid of some of the basics. And some of the basics was strictly working from life and observation. That's just the way I was trained and had the momentum going. And I was like, you know what? And I'm pausing because I'm trying to keep myself in check from swearing because I do that too much. And gosh darn it, I was like, I will not work from life anymore. And so that was the first challenge, and that was really strange and kind of made me break out in a cold sweat. It was really exciting. So I was trying to figure out how to work from imagination, strictly from invention, and to see whether the classical realist training that I had, which is part of the promise of that kind of way of working, will it sort of emphasize and will it make it easier to sort of draw and invent stuff, you know? yeah, so that kind of was a pretty bumpy ride and brought some of that stuff into grad school, and kind of I was like, that's the stuff I'm going to figure out over the next 3 years, you know? So largely that exhibition is the culmination of all those ideas, you know? And when I did that, when I was like, you're just totally working from invention, you can do whatever you want, it's kind of intimidating because I didn't know what I was going to do. And I just started making marks and trying to pull stuff out of it. And very quickly, I started to recognize that, to me, it was obvious, but it was like I was looking back to a lot of my old heroes of the surrealists like Max Ernst, and who I've been looking at a lot, Roberto Mata, who's I think he's from Ecuador, maybe, Chilean surrealist. And sort of the later incarnations of those surrealists, kind of going into strange territory, you know? So a lot of the pieces you're seeing, or actually all of the pieces that are in this show, are largely based on ideas of like automatic drawing, automatic painting, meaning, essentially putting down arbitrary marks, arbitrary colors, just starting and seeing what happens, and then start pulling things out of it, you know, just start interpreting things. And so the majority of the images, I don't know if we want to move along maybe? The majority of the images are, I don't know what the word is, I guess like sort of harvesting my imagination, I suppose, you know? I guess that's one term to use. So I would end up with all of these like squiggles and marks, and it became this very interesting internal game, struggle, thing, whatever. So I was imagining things, and I started to my sensing what I was responding to felt like it was becoming more and more subtle. And I was tapping into these unconscious places to the point where it was like, I was kind of freaked out by some of the stuff that was showing up. I was like, I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if I can do that. So my immediate response to some of the stuff was this weird censorship, you know? And part of me was like, you just have to just kind of just keep going and try not to censor yourself. So in my mind, a lot of it is trying to embrace sort of transgressive things, you know? Particularly even just as paintings, can I make those marks? Can I put those things down, you know? I don't know if there's any, you know, feel free, yeah.
Good question. On this one here, can we go a little bit more in depth of what were you thinking when you were working on this one here? And maybe one of the images in there, if you can focus on one of the images.
I think.
What was going through your mind?
So there's like a couple of them that are rooted in actual literary sources. And this one was the first one that I was like, okay, just go for it. So this is the first one where I was like, just make a bunch of shapes and start pulling stuff out. And a lot of it ended up being kind of like this kind of like adolescent free-for-all. It was suddenly like, oh my God, all the cool shit that I was into when I was like a teenager, you know, the monsters and the creatures and the science fiction stuff. And I was like, that's really freaking dumb. And I was like, just go with it. Just follow through. Just keep going and see what happens, you know? And so it was, it was kind of random and arbitrary stuff, you know? And responding to kind of things that just come out of the middle of nowhere. And so it's like, you know, it was, I think one of the things that started to appear was these weird little astronaut guys that were sort of, and they were sort of like embryos, and I still don't exactly know what they mean, but they're, but I thought they were pretty cool. And I mean, I don't want to get too much into it because I want to leave a lot for people to kind of make connections, but it started to turn into this story of like certain groups interacting with, like showing up on the scene and suddenly seeing for the first time this maybe civilization that was established, you know? And then very quickly kind of it turned into this, like a lot of the architectural stuff was starting to appear too. And actually in retrospect, I think what this is, I think this is January 6th. It's because it's called the breach or the cleft. I mean, that hadn't happened yet. That was already a year and a half, 2 years away. And I'm not going to proclaim that, but I like that sort of echo that's sitting there, you know? It's like a breach, and there's like this kind of, the architecture's breaking open, and there's like, you know, this sort of cataclysmic event going on outside, for example. Yeah, so I think in a way it was sort of riffing on like monsters and creatures and all this science fiction stuff, you know? Yes, that's kind of what it is. I think one of the things, I know what I was going to say. One of the things that started to appear suddenly is like, so you have all these characters, and now you have landscapes, and you have architecture. There was all these like pieces, parts for these like, essentially like theatrical events, kind of, you know? And actually filmic. So a lot of like film has been pretty important to me, and just narrative generally. So I found myself kind of like moving back into like trying to figure out narrative painting. So there's this weird cross-section of like the tradition, the great tradition of fine art, narrative painting, somehow interspliced with this like raw sort of, I don't know what the word is, base sort of cultural elements like comics and science fiction and stuff, you know? Which I think is kind of what the Surrealists were doing. And so I'm just trying to juggle with those terms. So this one, I think came after that maybe. So here's where the jump happens, where the painting, the big painting on the other side, which we can, when we get there, is called Roadside Picnic. And does anybody know that reference? It's like a science fiction novel, a Soviet-era science fiction novel that Tarkovsky, the Russian filmmaker, made. The film Stalker was based on that thing. And I think that was maybe the first sort of big one. So I kind of had this idea that I'd been working on for way too long, like 2 years or something. I had like done all these like things. I'm going to make this huge history painting. I'm going to be like a 19th century painter, whatever. All this stuff is fantasies going on in my head. And I'm like, this is just taking way too long. And I had all these dead ends. And so when I stretched that canvas, and I thought, oh, you could do that painting now. And I was like, it's not ready. And I thought, gosh darn it, fudge that. I'm going to do it. And then I didn't know where to start. I had some very loose ideas. I knew there was a bridge in there, and there's some figures at the base of a bridge. And I just started kind of plotting that out, and it turned into this thing, whatever that is, for better or worse, there it is, right? And I thought, that's really interesting. It transformed immensely. It has almost nothing to do with the original painting was about, or is going to be about. And it's took on all this stuff from these different sources, like documentaries I was listening to, and sort of news that was like a lot of news going on back in 2020. And stuff that I was reading and literature and stuff, and all kind of got fed into that. And then from that, I was like, okay, so now you got this big scene. What about an individual? Like now you need to make a portrait, and that's where that comes from. So this one's called Homo algorithmicus, which is like, I mean, I don't know if it's that clever, but it's like a take on Homo sovieticus, which is the Soviet idea, Soviet Russia's idea of the perfect Soviet citizen, you know? I mean, all the totalitarians do that. They have the perfect kind of like ideal citizen, you know? And so then my version is like, oh, well, here we are in this like new media, digital virtual culture. We need our own, because I don't know what you guys think, but I sort of look through the lens of impending totalitarianism probably every day from the day I wake up till the time I go to sleep. That's always in there. So that's what I imagine. That's kind of like our version, maybe. But he's kind of this like sort of dopey, sad cartoon character, kind of. He's like a cartoon. He's a caricature of himself almost, you know. And that's sort of that actually, I didn't start with that. That's sort of what kind of came out by the end of it. And in a way, it's like that crystallizing the title and the idea, I kind of have mixed feelings about a little bit. Like maybe it's a little too rigid, too crystallized. But I don't know. There it is. That's what was kind of happening at the time, you know. I guess this, if you get a chance to read this stuff, this is kind of, is that the one? No, this is about this stuff. This is the poster from the show that got shut down, shut down from COVID. So somewhere along the way, then the Drowned Giant came up, which is another literary source. So I don't know if y'all know J.G. Ballard is like a English science fiction writer. He did like Crash and High Rise. They've recently made a bunch of movies of his. Spielberg did Empire of the Sun, I think, is based on, that's him as a kid. I guess he was in mainland China during the Japanese occupation at the end of World War II. Great. Well, I don't know if he's a great writer, but he's a great idea person. And he's got this, has this atmosphere and this texture that runs through his books that I just am, it's amazing. I love that stuff. And when I read the short story, The Drowned Giant, for years I've been thinking that would be cool to, I'm going to use a bad word in fine art, illustrate. I'm going to illustrate that story. So some of the stuff that I was wrestling with too is like, are you even allowed to do illustration as a fine art painter? I don't have an answer, but I do think in our times, everything is so mangled and so mixed up in our postmodern era that you can kind of do whatever you want at this point, it feels like. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that, but yeah, I'm just going to leave that there. And so pretty much all I had in my mind was that I kind of imagined, because he keeps referencing, the story basically is this little sleepy fishing village, English fishing village, and people wake up one morning and there's this giant man washed up on the beach. And people are kind of taken by surprise at first, and then the whole story just unravels where people just are like, oh, he's becomes this strange anomaly, and then they just start living with it, and they just go on with their lives, and everybody eventually starts stripping down this body, and the body starts rotting. And this is very Ballard, but he gets into the whole detail of the decomposition of the flesh and of this human cadaver, you know, and all the people are hanging out on it, and the kids start spray painting it, and they come back and an arm is missing the next day, and they're like, people start basically butchering this giant cadaver, this giant god thing, whatever, right? So that's what I imagine. And he's constantly referencing like, I don't know, like, you know, Greek gods and stuff. So it's like this god has like washed up on the beach and we are sort of indifferent to it. So they start carving it up. So I imagine it as a statue to start with, you know. That's all I had. And I was like, okay, well, start, I don't know, it's on the beach. And I just started, I don't know, working through the ideas as I went, and then pretty soon all this other stuff came in. Like, I don't know if you know Hieronymus Bosch, there is kind of an obvious reference there. Yeah, there's a bunch of different sources in there that sort of served as inspiration to kind of like keep it moving, essentially. And just this idea of like a stone or marble structure split open and spilling out all these organs was really fascinating. I don't know, I fixated on that. I figured J.G. Ballard would dig that, so I kind of went with that. And I think part of my goal was like I want it to be almost like organs kind of almost as food. Like I wanted them to be lush and to dry you in at the same time as they repulsed you, you know? So yeah, I don't know what else is in there, but there's a few other things in there. And I don't know how, I guess, you know, chronologically it would be like hitting that one, but here we are. So this series, this triptych, this is externalities. So this is the namesake of the show. And I think I've started to finish up the last pieces of it kind of earlier this year. And some of those smaller pieces are sort of adjunct to that, I guess. And I think, yeah, they were essentially built chronologically. I started with this one. I had no idea what was happening. I just started. I had this sense, I've been looking at Neo Rausch a lot, if anybody knows Neo Rausch paintings. Contemporary German painter. Actually, he's kind of, we're moving along, but he was really big right at maybe in the early 2000s or something like that. I mean, he's still going. He's just, when he turned 50, they had a 2-city retrospective of his work, like in Europe. And he just cranks this, he just makes these enormous paintings and really just churns them out, you know. But he had almost, and he's Eastern European, so he has this weird aesthetic, I think, as part of the draw. Like people have almost like a weird romanticization of like post-Soviet culture, kind of. I don't know. I think I'm guilty of that. But so I started with, again, the automatic writing kind of stuff and started just trying to pull images out. And pretty quickly I realized, oh, you're talking about narratives and you need to start carving things up, because I had started to look more, I was looking again more at comic books and comic book narrative styles. So I was like, oh, you just got to go for it. Just start carving it up. At first I was like, that's pretty harsh and kind of garish and outright campy. And I was like, do it, go for it, see what happens. So I kind of went there, and I don't know, I'll leave that to the viewer, but I kind of like what started to happen. And then I realized, oh, this has got to be a triptych. So I started the second one, and then the third one kind of came quickly on the heels of that. And as it evolved, I mean, a lot of this stuff, like particularly this stuff, started to come out in that. Namely, like these things, and like this, and particularly this, like these sort of like, what the hell is that? These weird blobby things, you know, which suggest, I mean, you can stare at those and pretty much anybody's going to start to pull something out of it. I don't know what, it could be anything. I don't necessarily have a specific thing as to what they are. I mean, I do agree they're sort of like biomechanoids, I guess. They're part mechanistic, part biological. But I see them as, they're almost like, I still haven't got a word for it yet, but they're clusters of, they're like corporeal apophenia. Yeah, that's what they are. And meaning, I guess, I have been working out these ideas, but I had never said that before. But that does kind of make sense. They're basically like all of the automatism, all of the automatic stuff that you read into it. When the surrealists put down their automatic writing and you read into it, that's what that is. So it's in a way, it sort of gives the viewer like, this is this bizarre thing that you will look at and you will just start making stuff up, you know? And so I like this kind of ambiguous thing that's morphs back and forth in my own mind as the maker into things that become a little more evident, you know, maybe, and more kind of like, I have no idea what that is, and then you, the viewer, start to invent what's in there. So you start to make all these ambiguous connections, potentially, whatever your connections are. So, so partially what that starts to do too is by plotting it out in this comic book panel narrative way is it explicitly suggests there is a story going on there, there's a narrative. But as you sit here and you're like, well, you read comics left to right, and you're like, what? Huh? No, it's okay, so, wait, what? And then you're kind of like jumping back and forth, or this is what I'm hoping, right? Is you're jumping back and forth making these connections so that suddenly this thing is going like this rather than, so you start, my hope is that you start undercutting linear time, linear narrative, you know? I mean, we just start pulling out all these references that I'm making to it. But I think I really got into this idea of this strange place between belief, understanding, like having some vague idea, just a sense of an idea, and then kind of willing it into place or something, like watching something solidify as an idea. I suppose even just making a painting is like that. It's all painting reference. Self-referential as paintings is really what's going on. But watching that place within these pictures, like these strange abstract things, I'm not even sure what that is, starts to crystallize as I guess I know what that is, kind of, to something quite literal and overt, you know? And it almost feels like it's not really me. It's like somebody's telling me, it's like dropping hints. Like I'm just sort of pulling stuff out of the painting, hopefully. At its best, that's what starts to happen. I'm almost kind of removed from it, you know? So the kind of more literal stuff like this and this help coax that you're looking at a story, I think. But then quickly you kind of are, hopefully, I guess my idea is I like it if there's like this ambiguous place that happens, you know?
So I have a question. You've talked about narrative, and since you've worked for so long with these paintings, do you have your own narrative, not to share with us? Does color help us view these images and try to form a narrative for ourselves?
That's a question for me. Yeah. I would almost throw that question back at you, but
I was trying to feel the non-linear aspects in order to tell my own story with it. And the only thing I could think of was color. So maybe is there other elements that you would point out?
Like narrative elements? Yes. So without getting too detailed, I mean, so one of the final pieces that I put in there, I was like, oh yeah, you got to do that. That I drew in here was like, in each piece there's like the little moon, right? And here, before you get to the moon. And that like is a direct like linear kind of suggestion that you're moving along to get to this final statement, whatever that might be, you know? But I think it's still, I want to keep it sort of big and almost more of an atmospheric narrative, sort of like J.G. Ballard maybe, where he's like creating like an atmosphere rather than this happened, rather than like an old school science fiction story or something. It's very linear. But I will say, and I think that's probably evident, there's something cataclysmic going on. And I sort of view this one maybe as like some kind of crisis of environment. And I mean, I imagine these as like some sort of twisted thing between like the combination between Monsanto meets like H.P. Lovecraft or something, you know? So it's like, or Baudelaire's Flowers of Evil, if you know that. So it's like some thing of like these mutations that we have grown or that are suddenly appearing on the landscape that are like these deviant sort of growths, you know? It's almost like the Earth has cancer or something like that. And then, so this is like the environment, and this is maybe like our, I guess that's pretty clear, or I hope it's pretty clear, is it's like maybe social political degradation or corruption or something like that, like the dismantling of the traditions of our political systems, kind of, you know? I mean, there's all sorts of other stuff in there, but that's maybe too blunt. I don't want to see the whole thing is I want to be careful. I don't just like put a pin in it. So you're like, oh, that's what that is. And there it is. It's done. I don't have to look at it or think about it anymore. And then this then is sort of the deeper stuff. It's a corruption of spirit, maybe, I guess. So I think this is the, what is it? The Garden After the Rain, I think it is. It's ripped off from a Max Ernst painting. He was like what is it? Europe After the Rain, which is his sort of like, painted it in the middle of World War II, just before the end of World War II. So he's kind of looking beyond the war, I guess, you know, and looking at this sort of devastated, weird, mutated landscape. And then this one is, why am I forgetting these now? I'm on the spot. Confounding Fathers, that's what that one is. Yeah, that's Confounding Fathers. And this is Drawing Down the Moon. So, and if you haven't looked at it closely, I mean, I think from a distance, they're pretty graphic and they're pretty illustrative. But if you get up on top of it, you can kind of see like the painterly thing about it, which I really like. I mean, I've always liked like abstract expressionist thing where there's like paint. The paint is a material. It's not just sort of a veneer that goes over. And it's sort of evidence of whatever is back there. And it was sort of the foundation of whatever this built on. I suppose you could like take a cross shot like this and this would become like little landscapes or something. I don't know. I'm going off now. Anybody questions? Keep going. These kind of were happening simultaneous to the externalities triptych. Actually, I guess in the most sort of blunt way, there's a show in LA that was like, they want 12 by 12 paintings for this show. And I was like, I'm just going to start cranking out 12 by 12 paintings and we'll see what happens and I'll submit one and hopefully gets in. One did, not one of these. Kind of riffing on the same thing and just sort of almost like studies for some of the bigger stuff, I guess, just to kind of work out rough ideas and things that I was playing around with. And some gets more like, you know, plant-like or just still playing with these ideas, these biomechanistic stuff, you know. I mean, biomechanoids is completely lifted from like H.R. Giger, if anybody knows Giger. And that sort of like strain of art making. And goes like overtly like science fiction-y, you know. So I don't know. I mean, I like it. But it feels weird, yeah.
I was wondering, like, why is the biomechanism such a rich vein for you to keep like dipping into?
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, it's like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's, I think their sort of main like base matters of our psychology is a kind of, or at least my psychology. I don't know. I probably shouldn't make broad sweeping statement like that, but I think culturally, as far as I can tell, that's like a pretty essential piece of the way we're reading the world. That's what it feels like to me. Machine, organics. I mean, there was I don't know if anybody remembers the Surgery Channel for a while. Oh my God, it was so amazing. It was so hard to watch, but like, you know, they show like a hip replacement with this like high polished, like surgical steel chrome hip, and they're like banging it into this like live femur that's been cut off, and it's just like, holy, just to see that that's even possible. And basically we've made a cyborg, you know? And it's just, I think at this point, that's like kind of old hat really, but it's like, I think we're just sort of we're just have internalized this stuff, you know? I don't know. It's coming back out again as I'm painting it. And I think I was exposed to like H.R. Giger's biomechanoid thing, this Necronomicon thing. I don't know if anybody knows this stuff. At just this right time that was just like, that hit me right in the nervous system. And I was like, holy crap, that's stunning, you know, I think. And it just made a lot of sense at the time and the place where I was, machine organism thing. I mean, I don't want to get hung up on that, but my attempt, I guess, is to sort through it and keep pushing it out, pushing it forward, hopefully into something new-ish. And then Roadside Picnic, I guess, which we talked about earlier, which I know at this point, I think a number of people have said, what the hell does that have to do with a picnic? And with like, I mean, I don't even see a road. What is this, like on the side of the road, you know? I mean, I think that's probably a little literal. But I think one of the things I was going back over old material and documentaries and stuff that I was listening to at the time that I was making this stuff, just to kind of put myself back in that headspace, because it feels like a long time ago, pre-COVID. And one of the documentaries that was really important to me at the time was, what's his name? Adam Curtis. Does anybody know Adam Curtis? And he did a documentary called Hypernormalization. You know that one? And in that one, that's where I first made the connection. I first discovered the Strugatsky brothers who did the Roadside Picnic. And just his whole kind of take on, I mean, I can't go into the whole thing, but he starts talking about the Strugatsky brothers were writing the story like right in the like 1970s Soviet Union. So everything was completely upside down. Nobody really knew what was going on. It's just like totalitarianism, you know? Everybody's so kind of topsy-turvy, and it feels kind of like that's what's going on now in our culture. So I think they're making connections that way. But he was talking about the translation of that novel into a film, and I thought, that's cool. I'm totally gonna just step off that. And the way that Tarkovsky's film came out from the novel was so totally different. I was like, I can do whatever I want, pretty much. And so it's kind of very loosely based on that, but essentially it's like a zone. Some aliens have showed up, I guess, on Earth. Nobody really knows what's going on. The book is very strange to read. And there's a zone that if you go into the zone, very weird things happen. Like people go in and they come out and they're turned inside out, or they hit some strange physical anomaly and these weird things happen. And so it's just nobody knows what's going on. The top physicists have no idea what's happening. And so there are these people that go in called stalkers, and they have this sensibility of how to navigate these spaces, you know? So they're in a zone, and I was like, the zone. I kept hearing about the zone. William Burroughs talks about a zone. Hakim Bey, anybody know Hakim Bey? The temporary autonomous zone, kind of this weird anarchist, occultist guy from like the 70s or something like that. All these zones, you know? And I thought that really resonates to me a lot. And that was going on at the time. So I think a lot of that stuff was feeding in to that. And I've currently been listening to, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Weird Studies podcast. And I've been sort of eating that up a lot. There's some pretty interesting things in there. And they talk about the Strugatsky brothers and Tarkovsky. And they talk about the book, the movie translation, you know. And they go into this idea of the zone. And so it sort of gave me all of this new material. And I was like, oh, that was referencing stuff that I was thinking about at the time. So I don't know, it sort of has kind of bolstered a lot of my ideas, for better or worse, about what I'm thinking about, you know? Yeah, I don't know. Are there any? I could use a drink of water, but any thoughts, any questions?
It's probably a silly question, but the upper left part of the picture, it almost looks like an eye kind of peering into this dimension. I guess you probably don't want to tell us exactly what that is, but can you give us clues?
But what is it? I mean, I see it as a blind spot or as a black hole, kind of, sort of. I mean, it's an alien presence in this alien world, I guess, but they sort of reiterate themselves, right? They're sort of scattered. I almost see them as like maybe micro black holes floating around in the atmosphere of this world, I guess.
Are there any of these that you're still personally like working out the meaning of yourself?
Of the pictures?
Yeah, like are some of them still kind of like mysteries to you that you're still kind of tinkering on?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that actually.
Oh, me too.
Because they are right at this place. I think that was kind of the function of, at least that's what I've come to now, is like if to me, when I'm making a painting, if everything's concluded, everything makes sense, everything's clear, it's kind of, you might as well like plastic shrink wrap it and put it on a shelf somewhere, and then, I don't know, it's dead kind of, you know? But at least to me, it feels like if I'm getting to a place and I sense something's going on and I keep pushing it and I'm like, I still have no idea what's happening here. And if that's even a valid connection or whatever, I think it's better to leave it there and let it kind of sit in this like weird, let it sit in weird. Let it steep in the weirdness. I think that's good, actually. Yeah, and I think over time, like certain of these characters have come a little more clear. They're like, oh, that's what that is. That's interesting. And others are like, I'm not really sure. Sometimes people come along and they'll point things out and I didn't see it before, you know? So that's, I don't know, that's good. And at the same time, I'm not going back into them. They're you know, I'm done with them as far as working in them. But seeing all this like hanging up, I'm like, oh, that's right. There's something already starting to, I haven't been painting a lot this year. I've been drawing a lot. But I'm starting to get a little antsy. Like I can feel it like paint. Ooh, you're not fudgy painting anymore. And I'm like, I can feel it just going, it's almost like cultivating or percolating this tension is happening where it's just like, what are you doing? You're sitting around, like get doing something. And it's kind of cool just to watch that happen and feel like I'm being poked by it a little bit. And so I can almost feel like the next painting coming a little bit. It's like this embryonic state, and I'm not like pushing it too much, but I can almost sense the scale. I can sense the scale. I can sort of sense some of the textures, maybe some of the figures. I don't really know what it's about, but that's okay. So I don't know. So to see them like hanging up, because they're usually just stuck in my studio in these piles, you know, that I never really look at.
Can you say any more about like where your next art will go?
No.
No.
A lot of pen and ink drawing.
Okay.
That's where I'm headed right now. Other than that, I've learned better than that. Too many times I'm like, oh, I'm doing this. And then like within like a week, I'm like that. And then I feel guilty. I'm like, I just said this to everybody is what I'm gonna do. And there's like this weird obligation floating above my head. So I don't know.
Kind of like
What's that?
kind of like the movie. Is there any other like Easter eggs in your paintings? Something that doesn't quite fit the painting, but is still there.
Oh. Well, one that was pointed out, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, some of them. I don't know if this has been noticed yet. I think that was kind of a strange, and somebody had pointed out, oh, there's like a person there. There's like a woman being held by the dress or whatever. So I don't know. I don't know if that is one or not. Maybe you saw that already. But in terms of these interlocking shapes, I can almost sense how that becomes purely abstract. Like I can see those interlocking shapes as not being a hand and a person, you know? So I'll just leave that as a clue. There's a lot of things like that happening throughout the paintings. An Easter egg, is that what you called it? Is that a thing? I don't know, it's a deluge. That was the other name that I had for it. It's like a flood or something. I mean, this is the last little vestige of piece of land, you know, like some kind of pilings. Maybe it's at the side of a road. I'm not gonna go there, it doesn't matter. I don't need the road.
Scenic overlook.
Scenic overlook, yes. It's like on Fairview up near Oakley. It's a Fairview. It's all right, it's not great, it's a Fairview.
I have another question that might be interesting. What time are these? Are they the present, like man's internal world, or is it like picture of the future, a lot of them, or do you see them as being a part of a certain time period?
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Oh, I mean, I think in, oh, that's a really fascinating question. I don't know. I mean, I think science fiction generally implies the future, but I'm totally fine to just, I don't feel obliged to be painting science fiction paintings, you know? And I do like J.G. Ballard's idea that the future, like when he's writing science fiction, he's like, the future is like 5 minutes from now. I love that idea, you know, as opposed to a million years in the future and whatever, you know. I like that sort of, this is science fiction, we are in it, is really great. And I do feel that. I definitely feel that. Especially when you, like, I think part of what is laced through all this stuff too, I don't know if you read some of this stuff, some of it comes out, but is a concern with like living in a culture saturated with like propaganda to the point where we don't even realize we're in that. Oh, thank you, appreciate that. That it's just this kind of, yeah, we're so saturated and steeped in it, we don't even know we're dealing with it. Like if you read Hannah Arendt or something like that, or Masha Gessen was really important to me like a couple of years ago, and her ideas, her assessment of Russia and how Russia has reverted back to totalitarianism since Putin is a fascinating and chilling read because she's freaking brilliant. They're freaking brilliant, I'm sorry. And they grew up in, I think in the States, they were between the States and Russia and watched Putin's rise and was like a hardcore reporter and was like in there and was a very clear critic of Putin. And they were part of sort of the queer community in Russia, whereas they literally got called out like, that person is in danger. Like Putin was pointing at them and they were like, fuck it, we're out of here. And they moved back to New York. And Masha Gessen, I don't know if you don't know them, it's definitely fascinating reporter, journalist. But just a sense of authoritarianism and, well, even beyond that, totalitarianism and what it does to memory and your perception of the world is, I don't know, that's maybe that's like intergenerational trauma on my part or something, but that's a lens that I'm always looking through. And so if I put the other lens of science fiction over that, that's maybe what I'm looking at, I guess. That's what's being generated. That's really interesting. I don't know.
Definitely seems like behind, though, like behind what we're living or what we're perceiving right now. Like almost seems like kind of the man's inner world in some sense, or ideals or future, just something that we're not quite present in, even if it's actually presently happening. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. Like I imagine like contemporary times, like especially trying to embrace like history and looking at things historically, how histories kind of come and go. Like there are historical events that are very prescient now that seem to be like operating now that weren't that important 10 years ago, you know? So there seem to be these things, what even within art, within like certain historical paintings will become important now that will be very different than they are 10 years from now. You know, they'll kind of fall out of fashion again, which there's something to that, like in that moment. So now it's like, I mean, I'm reaching here, I'm just making stuff up, but I think, so maybe like, I don't know, Goya is important, you know, Enlightenment, sort of this weird, fantastical Enlightenment era painting is like suddenly here and everybody feels it that's watching that kind of thing. It's suddenly like the past is like directly in the present, you know? So maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's her. Maybe it's like, you know what I mean? So maybe, I don't know, maybe the future's doing the same thing. That's a suggestion, I suppose, of science fiction. If I keep peeling that away, it is all internal. There is definitely this like shift to an internal cosmology. I'm not sure how much I want to talk about that, but there's like an esoteric kind of stripping away of layers that's starting to happen, I guess, so in that sense, it is present, but as you go deeper into those places, they kind of become timeless, or that's what I hope, I guess. Jung, I've read a lot of Jung over the last couple of years, so maybe I think that's probably influencing that. Anyway, I feel like I've talked a lot. I don't know if there's any more questions or comments.
Does anybody else have questions or silly questions, hard questions? Impossible to answer questions are also welcome. No? Well, I want to thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming back again. We hope to have you
Appreciate
back again soon.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for coming and participating. Sorry, get excited. Please come again for our next artist talk, and please study the works here while they're here. This exhibit does come down at the end of the month. And please talk to Nicholas, ask him harder questions, maybe things you're wondering about as you're looking at the art more carefully. Thank you again. Thank you again, Nicholas.